Welcome to GHRC Member Talk Show. So I'm Ritika here, your host for the day. So we have the privilege of talking to Mr. Tarun Agarwal today, who is a professional known for their remarkable journey into the psychological health and organizational leadership. So welcome to the GHRC Member Talk Show, Tarun. Can
Thank you,
we
Rita.
start?
Yeah,
Yeah, let's get started. So, the first question being, can you provide a brief introduction of yourself and your professional journey?
sure. For 20 years, I worked in the corporate sector, primarily in sales, account management, strategic partnerships, and leadership roles at companies like Dell Technologies and Tata Communications. Then I transitioned into academia and entrepreneurship, combining my industry experience with personal interests. So now, as a student of social neuroscience, I research and lecture on human behavior. And as an entrepreneur, I'm building Empinetics, which is a neurotech platform which is being designed to scale empathy in our world.
So, what inspired you to establish Empanetics? If I'm pronouncing it right,
Empinetics, yeah.
Ep- Empanetics, yeah. So, what inspired you to establish Empanetics Research Lab and technologies, and what are its primary objectives?
Sure. Looking back over the past centuries, if you see, human prosperity has significantly increased, right? Today, the average person enjoys nutrition, healthcare, and education that were once privileges of monarchs. So the prosperity curve has an uptick, and a steep one since the IT revolution. But despite all this progress, our happiness curve is either flat or declining. Now, big part of this is the constant stimulation from social media and digital entertainment, which keeps our dopamine circuits overloaded. But now we can't stop the progress of these elements in our lives, right? And that of our children. But what we can do is draw another longer line. We could potentially protect ourselves from social isolation by building a trust network. Because deep social bonds are actually one of the best predictors of a happy and meaningful life. And developing these bonds requires us to develop the ability to empathize with others, irrespective of their age and cultural background. So, with Empathnetics, our goal is to tackle some big questions like how might we scale empathy and what might be the consequences of scaling empathy. In the short term, however, we are focused on training organizations because they are like mini multicultural societies to pursue the path of empathy in the direction of trust. The expected outcome is to help them resolve internal conflicts quickly, reduce baseline anxiety, and build better relationships. I would rather stress on this that empathy is the key to negotiate win-win outcomes. And looking ahead, as brain-computer interfaces become more accessible, we hope that our research will help people exchange feelings without the fear of being manipulated. And thinking even further into the future, as humanity becomes a spacefaring species with cities on Moon and Mars, the survival of the majority of us will depend on developing our ability to empathize and see humanity as one common group with a shared identity.
This sounds interesting. So, how have your roles as CEO and sales head shaped your approach to fostering empathy and trust within organizations?
Okay. So one of the first lessons I learned from one of my bosses at Dell was to distinguish between will and skill. He would always look at performance issues and check whether it was a will issue or a skill issue. So now, when I started leading teams and organizations later, while I had the will to see people reach their potential, the most important skill that I had to learn was to deal well with people. Uh, I initially my leadership style was authoritarian, what Jordan Peterson would say, tyrannical. But when I shifted to being more to being someone who removes hurdles and helps cross-functional team members overcome obstacles, I learned that it energized people to go the extra mile, and that was a lot more fun. Now, I've also had to let go of team members from time to time, but I have not yet come across anyone who is born to do poor work, right? So, like I'll take examples from sales because there's tons of examples that I have there, right? So, if a salesperson procrastinates making that call to a prospect, we might jump to the conclusion that she is slacking off, right? In reality, it could simply be because she's not confident of the opening statement. The fear of rejection can be paralyzing, right? Listening to understand the issue from their context and helping them overcome is enough to bring change. Some problems could be related to conflicting beliefs, but as long as we listen to understand them in their context and be truthful about its relevance in our context, the outcome is generally win-win.
Okay. So, could you share some insights from your research on psychological health and its impact on the employee engagement?
Right. When do members of an organization feel engaged? If you ask this question, right? I think what we have learned so far is that members of organizations feel engaged when they, one, have a shared sense of identity, and secondly, they are willing to stay with the organization for a reasonable period. Let's say 8 to 12 quarters, if not more, right? Now, for this to happen, either the organization needs a grand vision, like going to Mars, grand enough that, to paraphrase Nietzsche, employees have a strong why to bear almost anyhow. Either that, or the baseline stress levels of employees need to be low. When basal stress is low, we have the required energy to accommodate others' perspectives and turn our own potential to empathize into an actual ability. Low stress allows employees to connect better, and for that matter, people in general, to connect better with others. So it allows employees to connect better with their colleagues and engage more deeply with their work as well. Now, one caveat, although, on the grand vision that I mentioned, right? So the caveat on having a grand vision is that for collaborative effort in a high pressure, because if this grand vision, then generally the environment is high pressure and it's quite adverse to one's psychological well-being. So for collaborative effort to be there in those kind of environments, the environment must provide the autonomy to take risks and practice anti-burnout strategies. Otherwise, our brain's focus is always going to shift to independent survival rather than interdependent thriving. So let me put this in a nutshell. High baseline stress levels, or also known as chronic stress, it hurts employee engagement.
Okay. Could you just give a small explanation on the this thing you told in the end? Can you like repeat?
Sure. The nutshell
Yeah.
is, so if the chronic stress levels are high, right?
Mm-hmm.
Baseline stress, I'm always stressed, then my possibility of connecting with or understanding the other person's perspective is going to be low.
Okay.
I'm always going to prioritize because I'm fighting for my own survival. I'm fighting to feel good. So I'm going to be fighting for independent survival rather than interdependent success or interdependent thrival. So the baseline stress has to be low for anybody to be capable of understanding the other's perspective. Otherwise, the mind is going to be tunneled, and we're going to think from whatever habitually we think of people in that particular situation, and we use our own belief systems. We'll project our own feelings on the others rather than understand feelings of the others.
Okay. Got it.
Was I
So
clear? Was I cryptic?
no, no, I did understand. It was quite clear enough. So you have been taking the workshops. Yeah. So your workshops on leading with trust and empathy are highly regarded. Can you explain some of the core principles and techniques you teach in these sessions?
Sure. So the Leading with Trust and Empathy workshop focuses on understanding what drives cooperation and conflict in organizations. What we do is we dive into what people are, so when people are likely to cooperate and when they aren't. To give an example, for instance, if the work environment is high on internal competition, the belief that others will cooperate drops. In such cases, less than 30% of the entire workforce tends to cooperate with each other. Now, if individual wins are prioritized over team success, we see more attitudinal conflicts than idea-based ones. Now, we want idea-based conflicts, but we want to minimize attitudinal conflicts, right? Now, over the past decade or so, if you look at the industry, there's been a lot of talk about the importance of people and processes being empathetic, right? But implementation has been difficult, and I think this is because of a couple of reasons. Firstly, empathy can expose us to exploitation, to be taken advantage of, right? So that's hard. And then secondly, empathy is a learned ability. We are born with the potential. We evolved that way, but then we have to learn it because we have to understand people in their context. We have to have cultural understanding of people. And that requires energy to develop this kind of ability. And it's energy consuming like any other learning process, right? In addition to understanding the concept of empathy as random acts of kindness, just to kind of bring myself back onto what we're saying. So one is empathy can expose us to exploitation. Second, it's a learned ability, so it requires a lot of energy to learn it. And third, and which is in addition to this, is that understanding the concept of empathy currently has been as random acts of kindness, right? Hold the door for somebody, right? Now, this makes it hard for our brain to create a habit. We cannot have scattered experiences and then be able to build a habit. So through this workshop, followed by an intervention, we help people to see empathy as a path, with building interpersonal trust as the direction, with milestones, and increase in frequency of cooperation per relationship as the destination. So it's a lot more framework. It has a structure to be able to build empathy without really thinking about empathy that much, right? It's the direction is think about building trust. It's a lot more easier. So the pedagogy that we use during the workshop, it includes role playing through decision-making puzzles with live analytics, a healthy mix of theory, interactive discussions, and videos for conceptual clarity, because it can get intense at times to understand the concepts of both cooperation and conflict, empathy, and then trust. And then finally, and probably the first of its kind, the interpersonal trust growth framework that helps people to apply empathy by deliberately and systematically building trust, all while predicting and navigating the vulnerabilities in their interpersonal exchanges. So the framework provides the levels through which people can take their relationships. And after the workshop, we provide personalized trips, basically to help people take those actions that they devised during the workshop, and one-to-one consultations as well to help participants apply what they have learned in their specific situations. The idea is to be able to apply and scale empathy, than just conduct another learning session and let them be.
So what is the duration of the session?
So we conduct the workshop across 2 days. The first day, we try to take a lot of examples and ways to give conceptual clarity. So it's theoretical. And then second day, then we get hands-on and it's practical and people have to fill up the framework and its anonymity and all of that is taken care to ensure that they are building their trust network. So they're putting who are the people who are part of their trust network, what are the various levels of trust they have, and what can they do to move the levels of that relationship from, let's say, level 1 to level 2, or level 2 to level 3, and so on and so forth. There are about 6 levels. There's distrust, which is level Z. There's zero, which is no trust, basically no information. And then there are 4 positive levels, which is consideration, capability, communication, and then concern. And we cover all of that during the workshop. We also cover what are the sources of trust. Where do we get the information for trust, right? And what are the factors? What information do we look for when we look at building trust? And that helps us apply empathy while understanding whether these information are believable or not believable, or are we using our biases, and are those biases useful or not useful?
Okay, this sounds interesting though.
It is,
Would
it is.
like to be a part of it sometime.
Sure.
Yeah. So, how do you foresee the role of empathy evolving in the workplace, particularly in enhancing cross functional collaboration and customer trust?
Sure. Okay. Some of the things I think I did mention,
Yeah, a
and
couple of them were mentioned.
correct, but I'm gonna answer this a little bit more in detail. So over the past decade, right? So we're seeing a growing push towards building empathetic workplaces, and one of the most common approaches is to conduct 1 or 2 day getaways for team bonding, right? So what we call as outbound bonding. Now, while these efforts are good and should continue, they occur infrequently, once a quarter or once in a while, but not every day, right? And infrequent events or episodes don't really build habits. Habits need deliberate, systematic, and frequent efforts. So, to truly enhance cross functional collaboration, we need a combination of high frequency efforts, like using the trust growth framework, along with outbound bonding events. And as far as customer trust is concerned, most efforts, if you see, with empathy have been in that direction because it has a direct impact on revenue, right? The concept of product-led growth, right, is to understand the user's journey from their context and enable them to get their jobs done. But another area, which is B2B sales, where account management is important, I think there is scope for massive improvement there. How many account managers get noticed as trusted advisors by customers? They're not very many. The general notion is that if you're an account manager, you're a salesperson, then you're here to get your job done rather than get my job done. Right? That's the general notion. And that's that. And so salesperson take a bit of a slack in terms of being self-centered. But it doesn't have to remain like this. So the ITGA framework, combined with stakeholder journey map using design thinking, can help account managers break away from the perception of being self-centered. So in a nutshell, if I have to say, a deliberate and systematic approach can help embed empathy into the workplace culture, making it a habit rather than an occasional activity.
Okay. As a guest lecturer, how do you integrate your industry experience with academic teachings to benefit students and future leaders?
So over the past 20 years, I've had the privilege of working with a diverse range of organizations, right? From 10-member startups to corporations with almost 100,000 employees. And my roles in sales and leadership have exposed me to various stakeholders, including customers, partners, cross-functional leaders, team members, and investors. So these diverse interactions allow me to connect real-world situations to academic concepts. So that helps to make the curriculum more relatable and practical for students. So for instance, when discussing teamwork and collaboration, I share stories from my time on bringing cross-functional teams on the same page. When talking about customer relationships, I draw from my sales experience to show how prioritizing long-term relationship helps to build trust with clients. I must say that working with educational institutions is still relatively new for me. It's just been a couple of years. And I've noticed two types of student situations or two types of students. One, where students see concepts of trust and empathy as essential life skills. And another where they focus more on how to get a job today, rather than how how would they succeed and build long-term relationships at their jobs. Now, I believe that as industry increasingly values candidates who practice empathy and collaboration, more students would want to upskill in these areas. Right? But we are seeing growth in number of students who come in for these classes at the universities or institutions I teach. And so if, there's something that comes to my mind when I talk to them, that trust and empathy are arguably the second and third levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's not the first. Right? So the second and third levels are safety needs and love and belonging. The first one being your food, water, shelter, right? And then so a lot of students are there on that first level. They what they want is a job. They need to be sure that they have something to go by the next month, pay their rents. And trust and empathy lands at the safety and love and belonging stages, the second and third step. So, but by emphasizing them, the need for trust and empathy, I try to help students understand the importance of creating a safe, empathetic, and collaborative environment, both for the personal success and organizational effectiveness. Most importantly, why I teach students is because when they enter the workspace, we want them to come prepared to be the leaders, teach us on how to build organizations with empathy and not get acclimatized or accommodated in what's already there, right? So they need to be the torch bearers of new thought and help us show the way, light up the way for us.
Yeah. So, what are some of the common challenges organizations face when implementing empathy based initiatives, and how can they overcome these obstacles?
Right. So I'm again probably at the risk of sounding repetitive, but I'm gonna delve into a little bit more detail here. Um, but before diving into organizational challenges, because human beings are not people who are just workers, right? So we have a life beyond work, and what happens beyond work has an impact on how we look at what's happening within the organization and vice versa. So before diving into the organizational challenges, it's important to acknowledge what's happening in an average person's life today. Our dopaminergic circuits are overstimulated, as we said, because of social media and digital entertainment. And I call this pleasure fatigue. Right? It's too sugary for us, and it's painful after a while, but we don't realize how painful it is. There's high frequency of rapid rise and rapid fall. Imagine if you make a post and you don't get a few likes in the next few minutes. How do you feel? Right? You feel you want to overanalyze your post, saying, "Oh, did I make a mistake? Didn't I have the right hook?" So on and so forth. Right? And then let's say you get a few likes and you feel great, but then at the end of the day, the total number of likes or share or comment or reposts, they were not as much as what it was for the previous post. Well, look at how you feel. Your palpitations would be high, your anxiety would be high. And across the board, all of us are now feeling this. At least I'm taking the example of content creators, at least. But this is happening across everybody. When we look at, be it Instagram and looking at somebody else's life, we are experiencing rapid rise and fall of dopamine, right? Now, this is something our neuroendocrinology is not equipped to handle yet. Right? We don't know how, and the research is still taking place, and it's going to take a few years to understand how the neuroendocrinological system of the newborns are changing. But it doesn't look very promising. Now, as a result of this, the baseline stress levels, right, the chronic stress that I talked about earlier, that's increasing, right? Which means the baseline irritability is increasing. We're quick to get irritated. And high irritability is an antidote to empathy, as I was mentioning earlier. If you're irritable, You want to survive. You want to protect yourself. It's hard for you to take other person's perspective. It's not the same as vulnerability. Slightly different, right? Now consider high irritability as a constant. Now this has a multiplier effect to the impact of organizational systems. Now let's look at organizational challenges, right? And I'll broadly categorize them into two. The first one is structural challenges. And this may not be a popular opinion, but stay with me. Most organizations are set up to have internal competition. We often think that pitching people against each other for promotions and raises is the only way to run an organization. However, internal competition creates the perception of individual survival. We've established that, rather than interdependent success. Now combine this with chronic stress, and we have a significant obstacle to implementing empathy-based initiatives. Well, we can do something about it. And to my mind, what we can do is create a compensation system that rewards team wins, right? And create a sense of external competition where the competitor is not another company or a person, but an idea of a meaningful future. I'll give you an example. So look at what Sun Mobility did. On 5th of this month, they've announced a successful joint venture with Indian Oil Corporation. Who is Sun Mobility? So Sun Mobility is one of the rock star EV companies in India. They make batteries, they make swappable batteries. So what Sun Mobility did to increase collaboration between their leaders last year, they inculcated the idea of making adoption of commercial EV vehicles easy in India with their swappable battery booths. And the entire leadership came together to successfully form a JV with IOCL. Because what they could do in otherwise 6 years or 7 years or maybe a decade, now they would be able to do it in 3 years, right? Even less than that, maybe. Right? So that's what I'm talking about in terms of creating a competition which is a more meaningful future and an external competition rather than internal. The second challenge, I would say, is how we explain or understand empathy, right? It's mostly explained through scattered gestures, like hold the door for someone. It's my favorite example. Now, which is diverse. How many such instances can you keep on your mind? And it's inconsistent. You hold the door, you push the trolley, you get water for someone, you ask how people are doing. It's diverse and inconsistent, which leads to more misses than hits. I think from your own perspective, if you miss targets, then it doesn't do very well for your own self-image, right? It doesn't, missing targets, we want to be empathetic, but if you're missing targets and we have to go back and recall, we don't feel very good about ourselves. It's not good for our self-image. Most people, no matter how they are and no matter how others see them, most people see themselves as good people, empathetic, right? Our own belief is that I'm a good person. There's nobody who thinks I'm a bad person, right? But missing out on gestures can be quite discouraging, adding to the fatigue from chronic stress. So one of the solutions, what we think, is to give the potential to empathize a direction, right? Make it consistent. And again, to deliberately focus on and systematically build a trust network, because you have to apply empathy to do that. And so when you do that systematically and deliberately, what would happen is over time, this can lead to a more generalized ability to empathize with others. The number of misses will go down, and that's what we want, right? So to kind of wrap my answer on this, by addressing these structural challenges, right? The structural challenges and how we perceive empathy, organizations can create an environment where empathy thrives. And this can lead to better cross-functional collaboration, stronger customer trust, organizational resilience, lower baseline anxiety and stress, good things.
Okay. This was, yeah, okay. So, on a parting note, would you have to add any feedback to the session or any other topics that you would, want us to come up with next time?
No, topic as in what you wanna, the next speaker that you should invite? Is that what you're asking me?
No, you could be the speaker again. If there is
Okay.
any other thing that you would want to, extend this interview about.
No, I think you've asked many pointed questions, and I hope I have explained it, and it's not been complicated. And if something has been complicated, please feel free to ask me again. I'll be happy
Okay.
to unpack anything that might have been intense.
If you got
Um,
any other topic which on particular you would want to talk about, or yeah, that could be something that you can share.
Well, but my focus for the last 5 years has been this. And I think for the next few years, or many years, is going to be this. Is the how might we scale empathy? And what we want to do is eventually, as I said earlier, the long-term plan is to be able to help two people, irrespective of their age, irrespective of geography, irrespective of culture, be able to understand each other immediately such that they can influence each other, but they cannot manipulate each other. The difference is when you influence, you're trying to do a win-win. When you manipulate, you're trying to do a lose-win. You want to win, the other person loses, right? And the world is moving in a direction where uh, technology like brain-computer interfaces are going to enter our life, and it's not far away. We will be using it, and in research labs and for some languages, it's already become possible to understand feelings through brain-computer interfaces, right? Not for all languages, but at least English and in some countries, right? Or primarily US. So over a period of time, this is going to scale. And so let's say a German and an Indian, and I'm just taking Indian as one for now. They can understand each other's feelings from their contexts, and feelings are basically constructed through what we feel inside. Interoception is what we call it, and then we give it a meaning. Like if you're feeling palpitation, in one context, you might give that palpitation the word anxiety. I'm feeling anxious. In another context, you might say I'm having butterflies because you're falling in love, right? In another context, you might be falling sick. So it's not the same, right? It's the same interoception. Few differences in probably the neuro biology. So fMRI studies would light up a few differential areas, and that's the work kind of happening in the research labs. And that's going to make way into our lives. Like WhatsApp, we would be able to share, like read receipts. We would be able to share that we can understand, we can see each other's feelings, just to put it rather simply. But when we do that, there is going to be a chance that if I understand you so well, I should be able to manipulate you. And how do we block that? How do we not let that happen? And that's the effort that we're trying to put in now. So the last mile of understanding each other's feelings, so what are you going to do with that, is what we're trying to find now. And while doing that in that journey, we're trying to scale empathy where it matters most. Organizations, mini cultural societies, because it's like a mini country, right? Any organization is like a mini country, you could say. And there, if we can help people build empathy because they have a goal, they need to do that because they need collaboration. Collaboration creates innovation. Innovation creates organizational resilience. It's far better than just having productivity. You can be productive, but you may not be resilient, right? We have so many companies who were productive at their times, but then soon were obliterated. We don't know about those companies. They don't exist anymore. I mean, there are tons of names, and I'm not taking any right now, and all of us know, right? If we want to safeguard against that, it's very important that people learn to empathize. And then we have talked about the challenges, primarily structural, maybe a hard one to change. But the other one is how do we understand empathy? So if we can fix that at least by using framework and our workshop, then I think we would have made a lot of progress. And yes, by next year, we should be able to translate all of this into an app so that it's easier for people to use and easier for us to also scale to as many people as possible. And so we look forward to conducting as many workshops as possible, learning through those workshops as well, because it's always two-way exchange, and people tell us what's easy and what's not easy. And a student of design, I try to look at how do I make the framework easy for people to use. So yeah, so conducting workshops with companies at a higher frequency would be something that we would love to do.
Great. I'm actually waiting for the app though. I
The
would
app
be.
might take a little bit time because there's a
Mhm.
few things that we need to be clear about before we start building the app. But we don't really need the app to use the framework. That's ready. We can do it right away. People are using it right now through paper pen, and then we communicate through emails and through video like this, and it helps. It and doesn't have to be every day, right? So the conversation with people after they have attended the workshop is once a month or sometimes twice a month, and that's enough.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights. It was great talking to you.